Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Rana Maqbool with you at PTV World. In today's show, we will be taking a look at two important stories. The first, of course, in reference to what is the current political situation of the country. As, of course, we enter the month of August, we are drawing close to the dissolution of the assemblies and, of course, then the eventual caretaker setup that will be taking over the country. Of course, we also have heard the Prime Minister himself speak in an interview talking about how the assemblies will be dissolved before the 12th of August, which means they will be dissolved before the completion of their tenure, and that means at least the caretaker setup will be staying for 90 days. It is also interesting to note that during the same interview, the Prime Minister has also mentioned the talk of the completion of the digital census and the fact that the results of the new census are important to the upcoming elections, and that the elections in the country will be held on the basis of the results of the census, and that this is something that is the requirement and it will be taken up by the CCI eventually, and then of course the ECP will have to decide further on how exactly this will pan out. This of course raises question marks as to the timeline of the general elections in the country, particularly in terms of whether or not there will be any delay. A question that was also posed to the Prime Minister, to which he responded that it is the ECP's job to conduct timely elections and to ensure, of course, that the results of the new census are also incorporated. This, of course, means that there are going to be major concerns that different political parties are going to have, particularly, of course, the PPP, which has earlier also expressed the fact that there needs to be timely elections, but at the same time, there was the MQM who had stressed upon the fact that the new census and its results need to be incorporated in. And so the way that this is going to impact the delimitation of the constituencies and what exactly is going to be the way forward is also important. We also know that previously the ACP officials have also been reported to have talked about how when the numbers in each of the provinces change, this will require a constitutional amendment, which may not be possible given the acceptance of the PTI lawmakers. So we're going to be taking a look at exactly how this will pan out, and if there is going to be a dissolution of the assemblies and a caretaker setup, how is that going to take forward at the next couple of months, given, of course, the very serious political and economic challenges the country also faces, in reference, of course, to the IMF, and then also in terms of when exactly can then the elections be expected, given the fact that the compilation of the results that are moving forward with the delimitation is going to be a lengthy process. So we're going to be taking a look at this in our first segment of the show today. In our next one, we're going to be taking a look at something that we talked about previously in our show as well, the very significant and very unfortunate issue of child abuse in the country. And unfortunately, in a particular case, we've seen perhaps the worst scenario that has existed in these cases. And it's unfortunate that in Pakistan, it is coming in from the people who hold judicial powers in the country. And this is something that unfortunately have allowed them to still go ahead without any sort of consequence. And we've seen that the Lahore High Court again has granted interim bail to the wife of a judge who was involved in the domestic abuse of a child who was working at her house. Somebody, of course, who's in a very critical condition, and our hearts go out to her and her family. And the fact that when we keep on hearing about the very deadly abuse that Rizwana had to go through and the kind of conditions that she is dealing with right now, also, of course, point towards the urgency and the fact that this needs to be something that is called out upon, and that there needs to be no bias of any power dynamic or any judicial dynamic involved, and that this needs to be something that has to be done. We understand, of course, that the government and the Prime Minister have also expressed the fact that there will be justice, but exactly how this is going to eventually go about, given the fact that till now we haven't really seen that, is of course concerning. So we're going to be taking a look at that also at the end of our show. For this and more, as always, in our studios, I've been joined by senior analyst Farrukh Pitafi and Raja Faisal. We've also been joined online by Rana Maqbool, Ahmad, Senator PML-N. Thank you very much, Rana Saab, for being a part of the discussion. Let me start with you, because it's, of course, very interesting what the Prime Minister has had to say regarding the results of the digital census. And this is something, of course, coming in at a time where we're very close to the dissolution of the assemblies and the expectation of upcoming general elections later this year. But these statements, of course, changes a lot of what was perhaps earlier taken for granted. What exactly do you think is now going to go ahead, and what does the Prime Minister, what is he pointing towards when he talks about the fact that the results of the census must be included?
Thank you very much, Sana. My regard and respects to Mr. Pitafi and Raja Faisal, who is reappearing, mashallah, after many months.
That's correct.
I wish all of you the best of your time. Yes, Prime Minister has made a statement while in interview with the lady interviewer of Arch Television. Yes, he has tried to explain that since new census have been accomplished and in view of the new census, the further delimitation of the constituencies has to take place. And generally it's understood that this formation of the extension of the constituencies involves about uh, 5 weeks or 6 weeks. So therefore, he is of the view that not much of time will take place and it will not be delayed as far as the election is concerned. But it has really created a lot of doubts in the minds of the people since coming from the Prime Minister. But Prime Minister, I personally think in good faith, he said that when the new census is there, why should we go for the election on the basis of previous census? So it's absolutely reasonable to go for election on the basis of the fresh census. I don't think there is any hazard in process of elections, and more so he has also said that the conduct of elections is the responsibility of the Election Commission. And of course, Election Commission, as I understand, is now competent, fully competent to hold elections in under the section 57 and 58 of the Constitution. So I don't think though there is any ambiguity about the conduct of the elections. And Prime Minister also mentioned that he expects that the Election Commission will live up to its responsibility and elections will be conducted on time. So it's
Right.
not big of an issue, but I know once there is an opposition and there are a variety of people, they start suspecting even wind. Why the wind is blowing this way? There has to be something behind that. I don't think so. There is something behind that. Elections, more or less, will be conducted on time.
All right. Faisal, when we talk about this, Rana Sab seems quite confident given the fact that there is going to be no ambiguity. But I want to understand, even if it, of course, when we talk about the responsibility, it is the ECP that is there to conduct the elections. But previously also it has expressed its concerns regarding the inability to move forward with the results of the new census. And then, of course, there are serious question marks in terms of the constituencies as well. So when we take a look at this scenario, I understand that the responsibility is there on ECP, but is there no ambiguity in terms of the timelines that are now going to be impacted?
Yes, Sana, I would agree with you that there will be no ambiguity. Obviously, if we look at the interview, yesterday's interview was a very candid one from Prime Minister Sharif, and all I can say is he knew what he's doing, and I think it was need of the hour. This census must be done, but the only problem we are seeing is one of the allies of the PDM coalition government, obviously MQM. They have reservations over it. And of course, we know that if we look at the timeline, 224, section 224 says that elections, if assembly goes home just before the end time, as we are seeing that it will, the assemblies would be dissolved earlier than the actual date, which is 12th of this month. So it would mean that we will be having almost 3 months to conduct the elections. Election Commission would be required, obviously, to conduct it within the time frame of 90 days. All I can say is it might get extended just because of one reason. As of now, we know that Prime Minister, he has announced, and one of his party members, he earlier announced that the elections, it would would be on the 2017 census, but of course now we know that the digital census would be applied. And earlier I was talking to Farrukh, and Farrukh highlighted me about it and enlightened me about it. Of course, it would take roughly around 3 to 4 months. So I'm looking at, there will be a slight change in the dates. Not actually 90 days, but maybe a bit more than 90 days. But we are seeing elections this year. Reason being, all of the major parties of PDM, they are upbeat for the election as well. They are, if we take the example of PML-N, People's Party, all of them major parties, they are upbeat for the upcoming elections, and they are well prepared about it. So I can simply say that I won't see any extensions, longer extensions into the election dates. Election will be happening this year, and this is the year for the election for Pakistan.
All right, and Farrukh, I want to also, of course, understand that the timelines, especially when we talk about the fact that there will be a lot of effort going in terms of moving forward. The Prime Minister, of course, is also saying that after the results are then presented in the CCI, it is then going to be taken up by the ECP, and then there's going to be a whole new process that's going to begin. But I then want to understand what Faisal seems to be confident about is that they're going to happen within this year, but doesn't that also seems to be something that is again now not a certainty, given the fact that there will be so many challenges till we reach that point.
Thank you very much, Sana. First of all, my salam to Rana Sahab. Always good to have him in the show. Always a voice of reason and enlightenment. Thank you very much for his presence. But I learned something else today. One additional role of mine seems to be being Faisal whisperer. So all I have to do is actually talk to Faisal, and then I don't need to speak because he's going to quote me throughout the program. Right? So regardless, I just wanted to point out that it is not merely a demand of one political party, MQM. It is demand or spirit of democracy, that you include every vote that has been created in this country, right? So what does that mean? In 2017 census, our population was somewhere around 200 million. Now it is 2,500 million, right? So what does that do? It adds 5 crore people to national counting. And then out of that, at least 60 to 70% might be of eligible age as a voter. So what are you going to do? Are you going to ensure that they stay out of electoral process just because we have to actually match our timelines to it? That won't work, right? Earlier, while quoting me, although he got the number wrong, but Faisal, when he was talking about this, even if you add all those numbers together, it would mean that the election are not going to take place in 2023. He is confident, I don't know why. Let me tell you what entails by actually, including the new electoral rolls. First of all, you have to actually compute where exactly the new votes are. Then you have to invite them to actually get into the electoral roll. You have to start redistricting or delimitation of constituencies according to the new number. You have to actually ensure that all constituencies have more or less the same number of voters so that there's equity, right? Then after that, you have to put in the electoral rolls. You have to actually train the staff as well. You have to deploy the machines or ballot boxes according to the new numbers, and it is going to take some time. I mean, it is a slam dunk thing, right? It is clear. So why are we so worried that if there is an incidental delay in the whole situation, there might be something wrong with the system? There are two reasons. One, because whatever happened in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Punjab, where assemblies were hurriedly dissolved, and then we haven't seen the election so far. And there's an argument, and there's a very interesting argument in which army is definitely misquoted. In the past we heard from court reporters that army is saying that there is going to be humongous deployment of forces, and because of that you'll have to withdraw people from our border regions, and that will be difficult. Now, if taken it on face value, it is certainly going to create a mess, because you definitely need that kind of number or more to be deployed throughout the country. But the fact is that our army was saying that this is something that we can do, but only caveat is let us do it on one date. And that means that the entire country votes on the same date, right? So this deliberate misquoting of army's position has created a lot of speculation. Then it also actually brings into scenario another element that has been unresolved, and things are going very slowly. Remember that when the whole cipher crisis started, I had said that the country is going through a long crisis. People kept on talking about poly crisis, poly-juice crisis, whatever. But the actual fact was that it is a long crisis. That means all the elements that are clashing are in clash in a slow motion, and it is going to continue for some time, right? So we still are there, and time is passing very slowly. There's this relativity of time that amazes me at times. Each month it seems that is never ending now. So with that kind of a speed, the biggest problem then is that on May 9th, whatever happened, Sana, that actually changed the dynamics of politics of the country. You know, everyone is watching what exactly goes on right now in the country. And before May 9th, the political forces were ascendant. Now it seems that there is a situation where the system worries that, like Donald Trump, if somebody, the person who was responsible for May 9th, if they are actually, they will return to the system without any kind of consequences being faced, they can wreak havoc. Like similar kind of concern is in the US, it is elsewhere in Europe as well, where hard right actually seems to be ascendant. So now the system has to sort these things out, and it is going to require a lot of very major, you know, maneuvers from the legal system. You know how your legal system at this moment, especially thanks to our Honorable Chief Justice of Pakistan, is paralyzed because he wants to play you know, poker with destiny, and he keeps on allowing anybody who is actually arrested or arraigned on these charges. So that actually complicates the situation. The sooner the justice system gets things in order, I think that all these speculations will go away. Minus all these resolutions, our media is a humongous force of uncertainty, speculation, and in the heart of their hearts, they all are fascists, with due respect. So they all would want some other kind of system, but that is exactly the way they actually went for IMF situation. At the start, they kept on saying the country is going to be bankrupt and the country is going to actually wither away. The moment IMF agreed and you had to go for the kind of reforms that were needed, all of a sudden the story changed and it became the poor man is being crushed, right? And everyone is falling apart. Right. So with that kind of fascistic attitude in the media, right now all you have to do is just shut your ears, and whatever the delay might be, it is going to be finite, and it is going to ensure the country gets democracy and more democracy.
All right, and Farrukh, I want two clarifications. One, when we talk about the fact that, of course, this is important to the democratic process, that the census results are incorporated in the elections, and perhaps in comparison, then the delay is not something as significant. What's more important is that the census results are there. But then I want to understand, given the current political and economic crisis, also particularly the IMF and the challenges that the caretaker setup will then have to take now for a longer period of time, is that that statement still valid in terms of what is good for the country and the nation, that it is still important, more important than any possible delay that the results of the census are incorporated? And you say that the delay will be finite, sure, but how long of a delay will still be something that we can be okay with or can adjust to before it starts going downhill?
That is a fascinating question, and again, two elements actually should be counted here in. One, the media keeps on speculating against and keeps on raising questions, but thanks to our parliament, we have the kind of laws that delay or no delay, it doesn't affect the economic situation because we are going to have fulfill all the demands of IMF, and as long as they know that there are going to be elections and they are going to be in accordance with the constitution and taking on board all these concerns that are there, they will be okay as well. So that is not an issue. But media keeps on actually speculating because our media, unfortunately, and when I say media, I don't mean print media, especially our electronic media, is a one-trick pony. It is obsessed about politics. It forgets economy is a very important factor. It forgets terrorism, and a war on terrorism is going on in this country as well. So what you are seeing right now is because there is a veritable coup staged by right-wing, hard right-wing parties or elements in the Senate, they keep on glorifying those lawmakers who actually are somehow presented as the voices of your right and my right. Let me be very clear. Our hard right is supremacist. They believe in exclusion, not inclusion. When they talk about right-wing, when they talk about rights, they're not talking about your and my rights. They're just talking about their own kith and kin, and they're like, the hard right that should have rights. So with that kind of a situation, when our English media, when our pretend media also gets confused because of that, all these things point to the fact that in coming days, there's going to be more political chaos because we are once again redistributing the same radicalization that was there. But to once again summarize the answer to your question, delay or not delay, as long as we know a clear date, as long as we know that it is finite and there is going to be a proper election that includes all voters, then economy will not suffer.
All right, and Rana Sahab, I'll come to you, Faisal. Rana Sahab, these factors then of course point towards the significance of the caretaker setup, who it's going to be, and the kind of responsibilities that they'll have to now take on board for an even longer time. And of course, this is something that's going to be important, especially in terms of the involvement of other political parties and how the current ruling elite is going to proceed forward with that. Are we in any sort of progressive state on that matter? Have we achieved any sort of consensus as to where this is going and who it is going to be that's going to be leading the caretaker setup?
Thankful to Mr. Pitafi has raised very relevant points. Media has mentioned. Media is a main instrument of uncertainty. It's a rumor-generating factory, more so invariably and off and on. They try to build up stories out of nothing. And unfortunately, they also create a lot of doubts in the minds of people. And they are responsible for creating a syndrome of melancholy and sadistic situation. So I personally think there should be some arrangement for indoctrination of the media men or inculcating some level of rationality in the media men who try to analyze things and they very scholarly comment on issues which are not real issues, unreal issues. And more so, most of them, they resort to condemnatory and defamatory style against the government people and against the politicians. So they are creating a big gulf of credibility vis-a-vis the general public. So at least this huge monster should try to reform itself. And then I don't know what measures and which methodology can be adopted right now, but we must think over how to put the house in order as far as media is concerned. I personally think having some reservations upon the timeline or the fixed date, there are problems because we are not used to going for carrying out our promises in time. But it's in the interest of the political parties, and they think, no, it's high time for elections, being the present circumstances to a large extent in the favor of the PDM allies, because the man in the China shop is not free to create commotion and disturbance as he used to do previously, because he was the main instrument of Shamozel in the country. Here and there, he used to create mountain out of molehill, unfortunately. But somehow he is facing the trial and facing the consequences, and to a certain extent, his wings are clipped. Therefore, it will be conducive atmosphere and in interest of the other parties to go for elections. And as far as I understand, I've been listening to their discussions and their analysis. They also want elections in time. So I don't think so. If hopes are dupes, I personally think fears may be liars. And this time I'm happy Pitafi Saab ceases to be a prophet of dooms, and he is showing us a little light at the end of tunnel. And he thinks with that tinge of optimism that elections will be held, and it would not be indefinite delay, and those will be held in little more than the stipulated period of time. So let's touch wood and carry on with the work for elections. And inshallah, I personally think elections will be held, and these will be comparatively fair and peaceful elections. So let's try to endeavor to achieve the desired ends.
Right, absolutely.
Rana Saab, if you can allow me to ask a question from you. First of all, thank you very much. It's always a treat to obviously have you in our show and you know, enlightening ourselves from your thoughts and your views. A question here is that, of course, when Prime Minister was asked about the timeline, he said that, of course, you know, government won't be having any, you know, there is no possibility that they would be having any problems with any sort of delays. They are not expecting that there will be delays in the elections. But he mentioned the ball will be in the Election Commission's court. This is quite important for me. Why? Because on 12th of this month, in any case, of course, PDM would not be on the Constitution Avenue, won't be the ruling alliance. And of course, after that, there will be political parties. PML-N would be deciding as a political party. People's Party would be deciding as a a political party. Can we say that after that, of course, 90 days, according to Article 224, subsection B, I think Article 224 says that the elections would be held within 90 days, and Election Commission is bound to do that. PML-N as a political party, if this article is not being followed by the Election Commission, in any case, PML-N as a political party, would it protest this against the Election Commission and would demand that the elections must be held within the time frame, or they would do else? And if the Election Commission gives any sort of explanations that they will be holding after the census is done and they have the valid reasons, would there be a yes from the PML-N as a political party in that scenario, or PML-N still would demand the elections within the 90 days, sir?
Raja Saab, as far as the practical analysis by our people is concerned, they are of the view that now the election should be held. the election should not be inordinately delayed, because this phenomena will not be giving any benefit to the hierarchy of PML-N. So this is a consensus. It's therefore, Prime Minister is saying that it's a baby of the Election Commission to carry out and finish this business in time. But all the same, as far as you have mentioned about 224 article, but there is the section of the Election Commission, namely 58. 58 provides that the Election Commission can postpone the elections, give a new schedule, and of course with justifications and explanations, as you have said. But I don't think so. There are no plausible explanations to go for inordinate delay. God forbid if there is some calamity and beyond the control of the nation, that is something different. But as far as the routine hazards are concerned, Election Commission is duty bound to overcome those hazards and hold the elections in time. So I don't think so, because practically it's not to the benefit of PML-N. They'll be supporting that elections are held in time by all means. 1 or 2 weeks, as far as this 58, it is the power of the Election Commission, and marginal delay can be tolerated, but it cannot be the power, unbridled power can be with the Election Commission to delay the elections inordinately. And I personally think Muslim League will resist, if at all, some laxity or there is some demonstration of inefficiency on the part of election to carry out its duties.
All right. Yes, Farrukh, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I simply wanted to actually reply to Faisal's question, although Rana Sahab has covered the basis. But let me tell you, Faisal, that when it comes to political parties, all political parties have their own interest, and of course the people's interest and democracy's interest at heart. So the moment PML-N actually detaches from the government, its demand is going to be invariably the same, that elections should be held in time, right? But this obsession with the people, obsession with numbers, for example, 90 days or 91 days and so on, that kind of obsession actually frightens me, because we have seen what has happened in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Punjab election, because somehow people got so emotional in arguing. And we have seen some of our well-respected people like Ehtizaz Hassan actually going bonkers on the matter, while the actual issue is spirit of the Constitution, not only the written number. And that, unfortunately, is something that we have been defying throughout. My concern at this moment is that at this moment I don't think any political party is prepared. I'm not saying ready, I'm saying prepared for an election, right? The former PTI is in shambles. Then we look at these political parties, they still have to work out how to actually go about it. The electoral message is still missing, right? So while all political parties will keep on talking about elections being held in time, I think if there is any kind of breather, like a very limited delay, that is going to help all of them to actually put their affairs in order. And I don't know why is it that PML-N and People's Party haven't started with the election narrative, because on the other side there's a ready-made narrative, and if they want to win, they have to have a very solid kind of argument that can be used in the electoral process, so that you can influence people and you can win votes, right? But having said that, May 9th, and May 9th has taught us something, that the country's dynamics can shift very quickly, and people who were ascendant can actually be depressed very soon. And everyone is watching. Our heart state is watching, permanent institutions, the new voters are watching, the media, international stakeholders are watching. So right now what we are going through, Faisal, is recalibration of our democracy, which will be good if we actually stick to the script, which is democracy. But remember, if we actually try to create some unfortunate event like May 9th or something else, democracy is in a very tricky place, and you can actually lose control of the whole thing very quickly.
Right, absolutely. Rana Sahab, I request you to stay with us as we move on to our next segment as well. But before that, we're going to take a look at the small package at this unfortunate incident and a very tragic case of child abuse. Let's just take a look at this package before we start our discussion.
On 28th July, a violent case of child abuse emerged in Islamabad, where a 12-year-old girl, Rizwana, was brutally tortured as a domestic helper. The girl now lies in the ICU of the General Hospital, Lahore. The government took the responsibility of the girl's treatment immediately. After the news spread on social media and mass media, the police in Islamabad have also registered a case against the accused. Different types of violence, including physical, sexual, neglect, emotional, and psychological abuse, are committed against children worldwide. Violence against children is now recognized by the World Health Organization as a significant public health and development issue. In the context of relationship of responsibility, trust, or power, it characterized child abuse as essentially including physical and emotional ill treatment, sexual abuse, negligent treatment, and potential harm to kids' health, survival, and development dignity. In Pakistan, child abuse is pervasive yet rarely acknowledged as a social issue. The Sahel organization in the country keeps tracks of the incidents that are daily reported in more than 80 national and regional newspapers. The statistics show that girls make up 54% of child abuse victims, while boys make up 46%. According to the data, throughout the year 2022, more than 12 children were mistreated per day. Additionally, compared to 2022, there has been an increase in child abuse incidents of more than 33%. The organization's executive director Muniza Bano expressed surprise at the sharp increase and claimed that gangs that traffic in minors are increasingly engaging in illegal behavior. In Pakistan, child abuse is a severe issue that frequently goes unpunished because of poor reporting. However, for individuals found guilty of abusing children, there are harsh regulations and penalties in place. These punishments, which can range from incarceration to death penalty, offer some form of justice for the victims and their facilities.
Right, absolutely. Of course, the overall conditions when we speak about child labor and child abuse, this is of course something that needs our attention. But at the same time, the case that of course is something that everybody is looking towards, especially of course in terms of the family that is involved, the child that is involved, is of course a case of justice that we expect. And Rana Sahab, this is important, especially when we talk about any particular case that has a power dynamic involved. And even here we of course see that the abuser seems to be somebody who also enjoys that power dynamic and has again been granted interim bail today. And then of course when we speak about what so far has happened, it seems that unfortunately we don't seem to be moving in a direction that may have been expected. And I want to understand that when we talk about particularly this case, how will there be justice given the fact that this is somebody who is in power, this is somebody who's the wife of a judge, and the fact that what we've seen so far is not very encouraging?
Yes, word is with the winner and word is with the stronger. Unfortunately, because this man, husband of the wife, is a privileged person, he does enjoy some power and authority. Therefore, he is not being touched even with a long pole. And his own peers and colleagues are up to supporting him. Of course, ignoring the human angle and the atrocities which have been perpetrated on this young child and this poor girl who were underfed, who were beaten up mercilessly, who were subjected to so much of humiliation and misbehavior by the lady and by her husband, who was giving patronage. So there is some solution to the problem. Number one, to begin with, the system or the individuals who are involved in administration of justice should respond to this conscientiously. We are not doing these things conscientiously. We are doing this, responding very dishonestly, unprofessionally, unethically, immorally. What about the senior judges before these cases are coming? And they're not taking any cognizance. They are only relying on technicalities just to help the people in a very unreasonable manner. They are not doing anything, and they are not helping the people who are in problem and predicament. I personally think they should rise to the occasion. What about the civil judge is doing? The colleague civil judge is helping them. Yeah. What the district judge is doing? Is he supervising the conduct of subordinates? Honorable High Court is supervising the conduct of their subordinates, and Honorable Supreme Court, Supremo, the Judicial Supremo, are they looking into the issues, what their subordinates are doing? So this is very unfortunate. Total hierarchy, I personally think, is not delivering to the people because their peer and their employee and their buddy is there, and he has subjected an innocent child to so much of tribulation, which is unbearable. And one can't look at the child the way she has been treated. This is one solution. They should put their foot down because they are accountable to their conscience and accountable to Allah Pak as well, because such sins are not to be forgiven by God.
Right.
Not to tell the
right,
word,
absolutely.
But they should not.
And I want to explore that further,
resort
Rana
to getting undue
right.
favors.
Right, absolutely. But unfortunately, whenever we talk about a call for accountability, whether it's self-accountability or through the system or whatever sort of moral grounds is there, unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be enough for justice to prevail. And Faisal, we've talked about this just previously on our show, and the fact that there are, of course, so many cases such as these. But when we speak about the kind of laws that exist, the kind of implementation that's required, unfortunately, that is not something that is guaranteed, especially for the children who unfortunately are working in homes and the way they're treated, and under the garb of so many excuses that are also becoming part of this particular case, people tend to get away with things. Is this a problem that is not covered in the paperwork, in the legal system, and what is defined in terms of our laws, or in the way that it is then carried out and how it's different perhaps for some?
Sana, very good point you've highlighted, and of course this is a case which we have been talking about it, and you remember certain similar cases, they have taken place in the past as well, and we have been highlighting them as well. But here I think earlier Rana Saab mentioned a phrase, human angle. We need to look at as a human angle. If we talk about
isn't that what
system,
the justice system is? It's a given for the justice system to look at it that way.
I think it's not about justice system. Justice system is just a part of our state and the whole system of the state. Here let me say it, that every child who's born in Pakistan and is a Pakistani and holds the Pakistani nationality, it is responsibility of the state to make sure that he is delivered the justice required. And if some part of the system of our state system is not working well and it's just self-serving, especially in this case, it is self-serving system we are seeing, the justice system, then there is a serious trouble which needs to be looked into. And I think we as a state, we need to think about it, and we as a state need to strengthen our whole system in a way that every child and every human being living in this country gets the justice which should be,
absolutely, and that of course is the dream. But Farrukh, and unfortunately, we've seen that this is of course one case, and it is an extremely serious and important case. But there are numerous others that go unreported that nobody really even gets to hear about, and so many children suffer. When we talk about those cases that actually get attention, it then means that it's also important to be able to highlight and to be able to call out the people responsible for action. Are these voices actually helping in action to actually take place?
Right, Sana, and I think that when it comes to the voices, they are outliers, right? Faisal was talking about the state or its failures. I think there is nothing fundamentally wrong with the state itself, because all it can do is make laws and try to enforce those laws. There is something rotten in the society. And when you earlier, Rana Sahab was saying that I have turned optimistic. I haven't when it comes to judicial system. Faisal talks about justice system. I don't know what he's talking about.
Yeah.
Why? Because here, just notice that had that girl not been near death, had there not been maggots in her head, right? A living being suffering from this, nobody would have raised an eyebrow. This is one judge in whose household an underage child is working. So when we talk about child abuse or child labor, In Pakistan, the poor man's child is not considered a child, but a machine, an automaton. And they are treated worse than their pets. So this is, and their parents also treat them the same way. It is blanket impunity, and that will continue. I don't know if you talk about this one judge, the woman, whatever she was, whatever she did, whether she is going through a mental breakdown or something as is being now presented. But tell me, if you go to any, go to Lahore's, MM Alam Road and go to a fancy restaurant, have you never seen a family dining there, rich family, where one child is asked to turn their back to the food because otherwise there will be evil eye, and that unfortunate soul is not eating there and just sitting there as an ayah, because the entire society is rotten. We don't even see the value of human life. And that's why I'm not optimistic when it comes to justice system. They have told you they are going to save their own petty brothers. They are not going to take care of you, right? They are not going to take care of the vulnerable. I think it is important for the outliers to keep on raising their voice, but don't expect miracles very soon.
Right, absolutely. Thank you, Farrukh, and thank you, Faisal. And of course, our heart goes out to the family. And of course, what we can do is still raise our voice and hope for justice to prevail. And that is, of course, all that we have at the moment. We'll keep, of course, raising this and other concerns. Keep watching The Debate. We'll see you tomorrow.